Alina Brooks woke up with a pounding headache, the kind that felt like someone was hammering nails into her skull. Her cheek pressed against something warm and solid, rising and falling in a steady rhythm. She blinked, groggy, as dim light slipped through the hotel curtains, revealing a broad chest dusted with dark hair. Panic hit her like a freight train. She bolted upright, clutching her head as the room spun. Too much wine from last night, no doubt. "What the hell?" she muttered, her voice raspy. She glanced around. The room screamed luxury. Crisp white sheets, a faint citrus scent in the air, and a man sprawled beside her, still asleep, blanket pulled up to his shoulders. His dark hair was a mess, but he looked peaceful, oblivious to the chaos exploding in her mind. Elena looked down at herself. Wearing an oversized t-shirt that wasn't hers, but her jeans were still on. Okay, not totally naked, but where'd this shirt come from, and why had she been curled up on him like some clingy koala? Her memory was a blur. Lisa's charity gala, wine, way too much wine, a deep voice saying something about getting her home. Then, nothing. She peeked at the guy again. Handsome, sure, but who was he? No time to find out. She slid off the bed, heart racing, and grabbed her stuff. Her jacket was slung over a chair, her camera bag nearby. As she yanked on her shoes, a small moon-shaped pendant slipped from her neck, clinking onto the floor. She froze, glancing at him. He didn't stir. Screw it, she thought. Dignity over jewelry. She bolted for the door, vowing to forget this ever happened. Chapter 1. A Fateful Encounter. Elena Brooks was 30, a freelance photographer with a knack for capturing life's raw moments. Ironic, considering she couldn't piece together her own from last night. She'd always been the independent type, happy with her camera and a cup of coffee, no strings attached. That charity gala, though, had thrown her off her game. It was Lisa's big night. Her best friend since college had organized it to raise funds for a local shelter. Elena had gone to support her, maybe snap a few shots for the cause. She hadn't planned on drowning herself in Cabernet. It started innocently enough. One glass to loosen up, then two, because Lisa kept dragging her around to meet donors. By the third, she was laughing too loud, the room tilting like a funhouse. She remembered leaning against a wall, trying to focus, when a guy approached her. Tall, dark hair, a voice like warm gravel. "You okay? You look like you're about to pass out," he'd said. She'd mumbled something incoherent, probably about how the wine was too good. Then everything went fuzzy. Next thing she knew, she was waking up on his chest, a stranger in a hotel room, her head screaming from the hangover. She'd bolted without looking back, shoving the whole mess into a mental box labeled "Never Again." The guy? No idea who he was. She didn't even catch his name. Probably some rich donor with a hero complex, she figured, brushing it off as she hopped into a cab outside the hotel. Her jacket smelled faintly of his cologne, woodsy with a hint of orange, but she shook it off, determined to let it fade. Meanwhile, James Sullivan, Jamie to his friends, woke up in that same hotel room, blinking at the empty space beside him. At 35, he was a trauma surgeon, the kind of guy who thrived under pressure, stitching people up while everyone else panicked. Last night, though, he'd been out of his element. He'd gone to the gala because a colleague dragged him along, promising it'd be low-key. He wasn't a drinker, never had been, but he'd ended up playing babysitter to a tipsy woman who'd nearly face-planted at the bar. She'd been a mess, long auburn hair falling in her face, giggling as he tried to get her to sit still. "What's your address?" he'd asked, half laughing himself as she slurred something about living near the moon. No way was he letting her stumble off alone, so he'd gotten her a room. His room, technically, since the hotel was booked solid. He'd crashed on the couch, or so he thought. Waking up with her sprawled across him was a surprise he hadn't signed up for. Now she was gone. The room was silent except for the hum of the AC. He rubbed his eyes, still foggy from sleep, and spotted something glinting on the carpet. A small pendant, shaped like a crescent moon. He picked it up, turning it over in his hand. Hers, no doubt. He could still smell her perfume lingering on the pillow. Bright, like bergamot in summer. She'd been a whirlwind, crashing into his night and vanishing before he could figure her out. Jamie wasn't the sentimental type, but he slipped the pendant into his pocket anyway. "Whoever you are," he muttered, "you owe me a thank you." Back home, Elena threw herself into work, editing photos from the gala like nothing happened. She laughed it off when Lisa teased her about disappearing. "Too much wine, that's all," she said, dodging the real story. She didn't need anyone knowing she'd woken up on some guy's chest like a scene from a rom-com gone wrong. Life moved on, shoots, coffee runs, late nights tweaking lighting. She buried the memory deep, figuring she'd never see him again. The city was big enough to swallow one awkward night. Jamie, though, couldn't quite shake it. He wasn't a guy who chased mysteries. He liked facts, clean cuts, things he could fix with a scalpel. But every now and then he'd pull that pendant out of his desk drawer, wondering about the woman who'd left it behind. She'd been a spark, chaotic and bright, and he'd let her slip away without even a name. He went back to his routine, long shifts, bloody scrubs, saving lives. But that night stuck with him, a quiet what-if in the back of his mind. Neither of them knew it yet, but fate wasn't done with them. 3 months later, it'd pull them back together, and this time, there'd be no running away. Chapter 2. A shock 3 months later. 3 months had passed since that blurry night, and Elena Brooks had almost convinced herself it was a fluke, a weird little hiccup she could laugh about someday. She'd thrown herself into her photography gig, snapping portraits, chasing golden hour light, editing until her eyes burned. Life was back to normal, or close enough. She'd even stopped flinching at the smell of red wine. The guy from the hotel? A ghost. No name, no face, just a vague memory of a warm chest and a voice she couldn't quite place. She figured that was that. Then came the morning that flipped everything upside down. Elena was in her tiny apartment bathroom, brushing her teeth, when a wave of nausea hit her out of nowhere. She chalked it up to bad takeout. Last night's pad thai had been questionable. But when it lingered, she started counting days. Her period was late. Really late. Heart pounding, she dug a pregnancy test out of her medicine cabinet, a leftover from a paranoid moment years ago. 2 minutes later, she was staring at 2 bold pink lines, the toothbrush still dangling from her mouth. "No way," she whispered, tossing the stick in the trash. She yanked it back out, glaring at it like she could will it to change, but those lines didn't budge. Pregnant. Her mind raced, clawing through the fog of the last few months. She hadn't been with anyone, not since... Oh God, the gala, the wine, the stranger. She sank onto the bathroom floor, hands in her hair. "Seriously, with who?" she muttered. She couldn't even picture his face. Just a messy mop of dark hair and that damn t-shirt she'd woken up in. She decided to keep it quiet. No Lisa, no family, nobody. She'd figure it out herself, like always. She wasn't ready to be a mom, but she wasn't about to panic either. She'd handle it, one step at a time. Across town, Jamie Sullivan was elbow deep in his own chaos. He'd just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital, stitching up a car accident victim while the ER buzzed around him. He was good at this, keeping his hands steady, his head clear. Life outside the operating room, though, that was messier. He hadn't thought much about the gala girl lately, but that moon pendant still sat in his desk drawer, a little piece of her he couldn't toss. He'd catch himself staring at it sometimes, wondering where she'd gone. Probably married by now, he thought, or at least smarter about her wine limits. He was sipping coffee in his office, scrubs wrinkled, when his boss dropped a stack of papers on his desk. "We're launching a new campaign, better PR for the hospital," she said. "Need photos, good ones. I've got a freelancer coming in tomorrow. You're meeting her." Jamie groaned. "I'm a surgeon, not a model." His boss smirked. You're tall and brooding. It'll sell. Be there. The next day, Elena showed up at the hospital, camera slung over her shoulder, still reeling from the pregnancy bombshell but determined to keep it together. She'd taken the gig because rent wasn't going to pay itself, and hospitals were easy. Snap, some doctors, some smiling patients, done. She walked into the meeting room, adjusting her lens when a guy in a white coat turned around. Tall, dark hair, a little scruffy from a long shift, he stuck out his hand. "James Sullivan. Call me Jamie." Her stomach flipped. That voice, low, warm, like gravel smoothed by whiskey. She froze mid-handshake, her bergamot perfume wafting between them. "Elena Brooks," she managed, her throat dry. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly, like he was trying to place her. She saw it hit him, the flicker of recognition. That scent. He'd smelled it before, on a pillow 3 months ago. "Have we met?" he asked, casual but probing. She forced a laugh, brushing it off. "I get that a lot. Common face, I guess." But her heart was hammering. He didn't push, just nodded and started talking about the shoot, where to stand, what to highlight. She clicked away, hiding behind her camera, stealing glances. The way he moved, confident but a little awkward off-duty, felt familiar. Too familiar. And when he laughed at some dumb joke from a nurse, she swore it echoed from that night. Jamie, meanwhile, couldn't shake it. Her hair, long, auburn, catching the light, matched the strand he'd found tangled in his sheets. Her perfume was a dead ringer. He didn't say anything, not yet. Maybe he was imagining it. But as she packed up her gear, he caught her eye, and for a split second they both knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Chapter 3. Clumsy Moments. Elena Brooks spent the next few days trying to shake Jamie Sullivan from her head. That hospital shoot had rattled her. His voice, his laugh, the way he'd looked at her like he was piecing together a puzzle. She told herself it was nothing, coincidence. She had bigger problems, like the tiny human growing inside her, the one she still hadn't told a soul about. But every time she tried to focus on work, tweaking photos or scouting locations, her mind drifted back to him. Was he the guy? She couldn't be sure. Her memory of that night was a black hole with a few blurry edges. Jamie wasn't doing much better. He'd gone back to his scalpel and stitches, but Elena stuck with him like a stubborn splinter. He kept replaying the shoot. Her quick smile, the way she hid behind that camera. And that perfume. It was the same, no question. He'd even pulled the moon pendant out of his drawer that night, rolling it between his fingers. "Get a grip, man," he muttered. He wasn't some lovesick kid. Still, when he noticed her name on the hospital's freelancer list, he didn't hesitate. He called her. "Need a few more shots," he said over the phone, keeping it professional. "Can you swing by tomorrow?" Elena paused, her gut twisting. She didn't want to see him again, not with her secret ballooning under her sweater. But the gig paid, and she wasn't in a spot to say no. "Sure," she replied, clipped. "See you then." When she showed up, Jamie was waiting in the lobby, hands in his coat pockets. He looked tired, stubble creeping along his jaw, but he grinned when he saw her. "Thanks for coming. You're saving my ass with this campaign," she shrugged, avoiding his eyes. "Just doing my job." She noticed his gaze linger a little too long, though, down to her loose jacket, her slightly fuller frame. She tugged it tighter, praying he wouldn't guess. He didn't say anything about it, but he started showing up more. First, it was a text. "Forgot to mention, we need pics of the ER. You free Friday?" Then it was a coffee run he accidentally made 2 of, handing her one with a sheepish, "Thought you might need it." She took it, muttering a thanks, but inside she was a mess. Was he flirting? Stalking? Or just annoyingly nice? Then came the day he knocked on her apartment door, holding a grocery bag. What's this?" Elena asked, peering at him through the crack in the door. Jamie scratched his neck, looking like a kid caught sneaking cookies. Heard pregnant women need extra nutrients. Figured you might be, you know? Her jaw dropped. How? He cut in, flustered. You've been hiding behind baggy clothes, and you winced at the coffee smell last time. Surgeon's eye. I noticed stuff. She wanted to slam the door, but he held up the bag like a peace offering. It's just milk and vitamins. Don't kill me, she sighed, stepping aside. Fine, but I don't need a babysitter. He walked in, grinning. Noted, except he'd bought baby formula instead of prenatal vitamins, and when she pointed it out, he turned red. Shit, I grabbed the wrong thing. I'm not good at this. Elena laughed despite herself, the first real laugh she'd had in days. You're a doctor. How do you mess that up? He shrugged, helpless. I fix people, not shop for them. It broke the ice, though, and she let him stick around, mostly because he wouldn't leave. He kept coming back, once with a burned batch of muffins he'd tried to bake. Thought you'd like these, but I suck at ovens. Another time with a book on pregnancy he'd clearly skimmed, dog-eared pages and all. She started to like it, his awkward attempts to help. He wasn't pushy, just there. One afternoon, he insisted on driving her to her first ultrasound. I've got a car, you've got a baby. Makes sense, he said, like it was a done deal. She rolled her eyes but climbed in. At the clinic, she lay on the table, nervous as hell, gel cold on her stomach. Jamie stood beside her, hands shoved in his pockets, pretending he wasn't freaking out too. When the tech turned on the screen, a tiny heartbeat thumped through the room. Fast, steady, alive. Elena's breath caught. She glanced at Jamie, expecting his usual cool doctor vibe, but he was wrecked. His eyes were red, one hand gripping the chair so hard his knuckles went white. That's it? He whispered, like he couldn't believe it. She nodded, swallowing hard. Yeah, first time hearing it. He didn't say anything else, just stared at that grainy little blob like it was the whole damn world. Elena turned away, blinking back her own tears, pretending it was just sweat stinging her eyes. She hadn't expected him to care that much. She'd figured he was in this out of guilt or curiosity or whatever weird thing tied them to that night. But the way he looked at that screen, it hit her square in the chest. Driving home, they were quiet, the hum of the car filling the space. You didn't have to come, she said finally, staring out the window. Jamie kept his eyes on the road. I know, wanted to. She didn't push it, but something shifted. She started wondering, really wondering, if he was the guy from that night. Her memory was still a mess, but the pieces fit too well. His voice, his scent, the way he stuck around like he owed her something, or maybe wanted to. Jamie wasn't sure either, not completely. He hadn't done anything that night. He was pretty damn certain he'd slept on the couch, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was his mess too, and honestly, he didn't want to. Elena was a wildfire, sharp, messy, real, and he was drawn to her in a way he hadn't been to anyone in years. That heartbeat sealed it. He wasn't walking away, not now. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both felt it. Whatever this was, it was growing, clumsy and unsteady, like a Polaroid developing in the dark. Chapter 4, Secrets Unraveled. Elena Brooks was getting used to Jamie Sullivan's chaos creeping into her life. The burnt muffins, the baby formula mix-up, the way he'd hover like a worried puppy. It was ridiculous, but it was growing on her. She'd stopped shoving him out the door, even started leaving it unlocked when she knew he'd swing by. He wasn't just the maybe dad from that blurry night anymore. He was Jamie, the guy who'd burned his hand trying to make her tea and laughed it off with a shrug. She liked him, more than she wanted to admit. But liking him came with a catch. She'd catch herself watching him too long, wondering what he was thinking when he stared at her belly or cracked one of his dumb doctor jokes. It was dangerous territory, and she wasn't sure she was ready to cross it. Then he threw her a curveball. Hospital's throwing a party, he said one night, leaning against her kitchen counter, arms crossed. For the staff, some donors. I don't want to go solo. Come with me? She raised an eyebrow, wiping flour off her hands. She'd been messing with a cookie recipe, mostly to prove she could outdo his disasters. Me? At a fancy doctor thing? I'll stick out like a sore thumb. He grinned, that lopsided one that made her stomach flip. You'll fit right in. Plus, I need someone to keep me from spilling wine on the wrong person. She rolled her eyes but said yes, half because she was curious, half because she couldn't say no to that look. The party was at some swanky rooftop place, all twinkling lights and jazz floating over the chatter. Elena wore a dark green dress flowy enough to hide the bump and a spritz of her bergamot perfume. Jamie stuck close, introducing her to people. This is Elena, my friend. And she smiled through it, wondering what friend even meant. The mother of his maybe kid? The girl he kept feeding burnt pastries? He sipped soda, feeling out of place among the suits and stethoscopes, until a woman walked in and turned the night sideways. She was tall, sleek black hair spilling over a red dress that hugged every curve. Confident, sharp, like she owned the room. Elena overheard a nurse whisper, "That's Claire. Used to be engaged to Jamie." Her stomach sank. Claire made a beeline for him, all smiles and familiarity, resting a hand on his arm like it belonged there. "Jamie Sullivan, still playing the stoic card?" she teased, voice smooth as honey. He nodded, polite but stiff. "Good to see you, Claire. Been a while." Elena turned away, pretending to study her drink, but she caught every word. Claire laughed about old times, cases they'd worked, late nights at the hospital. Jamie kept it short. Yeah, a long time ago, but they talked long enough for Elena's brain to spin a whole damn movie. Claire, gorgeous, brilliant, the ex-fiancé swooping back in. Elena, the pregnant mess who didn't even know if he was the father. She gulped her soda, nearly choking, telling herself she didn't care. He could flirt with whoever, she wasn't jealous. No way. Except she was. The rest of the night, she sulked fake smiles for his colleagues, brushing off his offer of dessert with a curt, "Not hungry." Jamie noticed, his brow furrowing, but he didn't push. She hated how much it bugged her, that gnawing feeling Claire was better suited for him. Then the party hit its peak. Claire took the mic, all charm, talking up some hospital collab. She ended with a beaming, "Looking forward to working with you again, Jamie." Elena gripped her glass, picturing it sailing across the room. Not jealous, just annoyed, right? But Jamie stood up next, taking the stage. His voice was steady, cutting through the buzz. "Thanks, everyone. Quick shout out. I want you to meet someone." He turned to Elena, eyes locking on hers. "This is Elena Brooks, the most important person in my life right now." The room went quiet, then buzzed with whispers. Elena's face burned, caught off guard. Claire's smile tightened. Jamie stepped down, pulling her up beside him despite her stammering. "What are you doing?" He leaned in, whispering, "Just the truth. You're the mother of my kid, or close enough." She didn't know whether to laugh or run. Later, in his car, he pulled over by a quiet street and dug something out of his jacket. A small box. Inside was a new moon pendant, twin to the one she'd lost. "Saw it last week," he said, handing it over. "Kept the old one 'cause I couldn't forget you. This one's yours." Her heart thudded. "You didn't have to," she said, fingers curling around it. He met her eyes, softer than she'd ever seen. "Wanted to." She mumbled a thanks, head spinning, but the warmth lingered, until Claire's shadow crept back in. At the hospital a few days later, Claire cornered her while Jamie was in surgery. "You know he was engaged, right?" she said, casual but pointed. 3 months ago, when you got knocked up. We were still together then." Elena froze, the pendant suddenly heavy in her pocket. "What?" Claire smirked. "He didn't tell you? Typical Jamie, keeps his cards close." Elena's world tilted. Engaged? 3 months ago? She'd assumed that night was theirs, messy as it was, but now doubt clawed at her. If he was with Claire then, whose kid was this? She stormed out, head a mess, the pendant burning a hole in her hand. She'd fallen for him, his clumsy muffins, his quiet care. But what if it was all a lie? Jamie came out of surgery an hour later, saw her gone, and cursed under his breath. He'd seen that look in her eyes before, the night she'd bolted from the hotel. This time, he wasn't letting her slip away without a fight. Chapter 5. Truth in the Storm. Elena Brooks couldn't breathe right after Claire's bombshell. She'd stormed out of the hospital, the new moon pendant swinging in her fist like a taunt. Jamie engaged? 3 months ago? Her head spun, piecing together a nightmare she hadn't seen coming. She'd let herself fall for him, the stupid muffins, the ultrasound tears, the way he'd called her important in front of everyone. Now it felt like quicksand. If he was with Claire that night, then whose kid was kicking inside her? She needed answers, but first she needed air. She didn't tell him she was done, just stopped answering his texts. He'd send a quick, "You okay?" or "Need anything?" and she'd stare at the screen, fingers hovering, then lock it away. She threw herself into editing photos, blasting music to drown out the questions. But her belly kept growing, a quiet reminder she couldn't outrun this. She had to face him. So one rainy afternoon, she showed up at his apartment, soaked from the downpour, and banged on the door. Jamie opened it, still in scrubs, eyes widening. "Elena? What?" She cut him off, voice shaking. "Were you engaged to Claire 3 months ago? When that night happened?" He blinked, caught off guard, then rubbed his face like he'd been dreading this. "Yeah, I was." "Come in, you're drenched." She stepped inside, arms crossed tight, water dripping onto his floor. "Tell me the truth, Jamie. Was it you? Or am I carrying some other guy's kid while you play hero?" He sighed, heavy, leaning against the counter. "Sit down, please." She didn't, just glared, so he started talking. "Claire and I were engaged, technically. It was a mess. I proposed a year ago because it made sense. 2 doctors, same world, but I didn't love her, never did. I called it off 2 weeks before that gala. She didn't take it well, kept acting like we were still a thing. That night I was done with her for good." Elena's chest tightened. "So, you weren't with her when—" He shook his head, firm. "No, I was with you." "Well, not with you. I found you at the bar, wasted, slurring about the moon. I couldn't leave you there, so I got us a room. I slept on the couch, or tried to. You climbed on me in the middle of the night, passed out cold. We didn't do anything, I swear." Her knees wobbled. She sank onto his couch, hands on her face. "Then why's Claire saying—" He cut in, voice low. "She's pissed I moved on. She saw us at the party, figured she'd stir the pot. But Elena, I don't know whose kid that is. I assumed it was mine because of the timing, but I wasn't sure. Were you with someone else back then?" Her breath hitched. She hadn't thought about it, hadn't wanted to, but now she remembered. A fling. A week before the gala, some guy she'd met at a shoot, quick, meaningless, over before it started. She'd buried it under the wine and the chaos of that night with Jamie. "Oh God," she whispered, eyes wide. "It might not be yours." He nodded, slow, like he'd already guessed. "Okay, we'll figure it out. DNA test after the baby's born, but I'm here, Elena. I don't care whose it is." She stared at him, tears brimming. "Why? Why stick around if it's not yours?" He looked away, then back, eyes soft. "Because it's you. I've been hooked since you ditched me with that pendant." She didn't know what to say, just sat there, rain hammering the windows, until fate decided for her. That night, the storm got worse, dark clouds swallowing the city, wind howling like a warning. Elena was home, curled on her couch, when a sharp pain ripped through her. She gasped, clutching her belly. Another hit, harder, faster than she'd expected, 2 weeks early. Panic clawed at her. She grabbed her phone, hands trembling, and called Jamie. "Elena?" His voice was groggy, he'd been asleep, but it sharpened fast when he heard her ragged breathing. "What's wrong?" I think Labor, she choked out, gripping the armrest. Now? She heard a crash, probably his lamp, then a muffled shit. He yelled, "I'm coming, don't hang up." She managed a shaky laugh through the pain. "Don't crash, it's pouring." His car door slammed, engine roaring over the rain. "Keep talking, I'm almost there." The contractions came fast, brutal, doubling her over. She dragged herself to the door, planning to call 911 when headlights cut through the storm. Jamie burst out, soaked to the bone, hair plastered to his face. He caught her as her legs buckled. "Why are you out here?" he shouted over the wind. "You're too slow," she gasped, clinging to him as another wave hit. He scooped her up, cursing the rain, and sped to the hospital, one hand on hers the whole way. "I'm here," he kept saying. "You've got this." In the ER, they rushed her to delivery, Jamie trailing, barking at nurses. "I'm staying. Don't kick me out." She gripped his hand on the table, sweat pouring, screaming through the pain. "Tell me something," she begged, voice fading. "Anything." He froze, then squeezed her hand. "That night, you were a mess, giggling, calling me Moon Man. I stayed because you felt right. When you left, I kept that pendant like an idiot, looking for you in every crowd. I love you, Elena. Been too scared to say it." Tears mixed with her sweat. "You're an ass for waiting," she rasped, smiling faintly. "Love you too." Nurses yelled to push, and she did, hard, Jamie whispering, "Marry me, not just for this, for us." She nodded, breathless. "Yes." And with one last scream, a baby's cry broke the air. A girl. They named her Luna, after the pendant that tied them together. Days later, the DNA test came back. Jamie wasn't the father. Her fling was. Elena braced for him to bolt, but he just held Luna, blue eyes steady. "She's mine anyway. We're a family." She leaned into him, his chest warm under her cheek, and knew he meant it. Storm or not, he wasn't leaving. Chapter 6. A New Family. Elena Brooks couldn't believe how fast everything had settled after that stormy night. Luna was here. Tiny, squirmy, with dark curls and eyes that sparkled like the sky after rain. The DNA test had hit hard. Jamie wasn't her biological dad. Elena had braced herself, expecting him to pull back, to rethink the whole "marry me" thing he'd blurted out in the delivery room. But he didn't. He just looked at Luna, cradled in his arms, and said, "Doesn't change a damn thing." And somehow she believed him. They moved into his place a week later. Her cramped apartment wasn't built for three. It was chaos from the start. Jamie, the guy who could sew up a gunshot wound blindfolded, was a total disaster with diapers. The first time he tried, he taped it on backwards, and Luna wailed until Elena swooped in, laughing so hard she nearly dropped the wipes. "You're hopeless," she teased, fixing it in seconds. He grinned, sheepish, holding Luna up like a trophy. "She still loves me. Look at that giggle." He was right. She did. Luna's little coos lit him up, turning the stoic surgeon into a goofball who'd sing off-key lullabies until Elena begged him to stop. "You're torturing her ears," she'd say, but she'd catch herself smiling, leaning against the doorway as he rocked Luna in the nursery he'd painted himself. Soft blue, with a crooked moon he'd drawn freehand. "I'm a doctor, not an artist," he'd muttered when she'd pointed out the wobble. She loved it anyway. They figured it out together, day by day. Sleepless nights where he'd stumble to the kitchen for bottles, only to spill half the formula on his shirt. Afternoons in the park where he'd push the stroller too fast, Luna squealing as Elena yelled, "Slow down, you maniac!" Through it all, she watched their little world take shape. Not perfect, but hers. Jamie wasn't just sticking around out of duty. He was in it, fully, like he'd been waiting for this his whole life. 6 months later, they decided to make it official. A small wedding, nothing fancy, just a handful of friends in the backyard of his house, where he'd planted a scraggly little pear tree he swore he'd keep alive for Luna. The sun was dipping low, casting gold over the grass, a breeze tugging at Elena's hair. She wore a simple white dress, Luna in her arms, and walked toward Jamie, barefoot, the earth cool under her feet. He stood there in a gray suit, hands fidgeting with the ring, his blue eyes locked on her like she was the only thing in the world. He slipped the ring on her finger, voice low and steady despite the slight tremble in his hands. You crashed into my life, drunk and loud, and I didn't know I needed you till you were gone. I'm not good at this, burning muffins, spilling tea, but I promise I'll spend every day trying to be the guy you and Luna deserve. Elena laughed, tears streaking her cheeks, and squeezed his hand. You're already more than I thought I'd get. I'll stick around, even if you torch every kitchen we own. She kissed him, soft and sure, Luna gurgling between them as their friends cheered. His family wasn't there. His parents, stiff old money types, hadn't warmed to Elena, muttering about her situation and how she wasn't doctor material like Claire. Jamie didn't flinch. They don't get a vote, he told her after a tense call where his mom brought up Claire again. This is us, not them. She nodded, grateful he'd chosen her over their expectations, over the perfect ex who still lingered like a ghost. That night, after Luna was down in her crib, they sat on the porch, hand in hand, the sky a deep indigo speckled with stars. The air was still, just the rustle of leaves and their quiet breathing. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling that familiar warmth of his chest, the same one she'd woken up on all those months ago, scared and lost. Now it was home. Jamie, she said, voice soft, if there's another life after this, I'd still pick waking up next to you, even if I don't remember why. He turned to her, eyes gentler than she'd ever seen, and brushed a kiss across her forehead. And I'd still keep that pendant, or chase you down with burnt muffins till you stayed. No ditching me next time. She laughed, pulling him close, and they sat there, wrapped in each other, Luna's soft snores drifting through the open window. It wasn't flawless. He still botched half the meals he tried, once setting off the smoke alarm with a pan of charred pancakes, Elena waving a towel and yelling, "Stick to surgery!" She'd still snap at him when exhaustion hit, and he'd retreat to the garage to tinker with tools he barely knew how to use. But they'd find each other again, her tugging him back with a smirk, him pulling her into a hug that smelled faintly of antiseptic and home. Luna grew, her curls wilder, her laugh louder, and they grew with her. From that messy night in a hotel, they'd built something real. Not the fairy tale kind, but the kind that held up through storms and spilled milk. Elena would catch Jamie staring at them sometimes, her editing photos, Luna chewing on a toy, and he'd smile, quiet, like he couldn't believe this was his. She'd smile back, knowing she'd chosen him too. Biology be damned. Under that pear tree, still scraggly but alive, they'd sit as a family, Elena's head on his chest, Luna tugging at grass. "You're not her dad by blood," she said once, voice low, "but you're the one I'd pick every time." He squeezed her hand, eyes on Luna. "Good, 'cause I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, with the sun sinking and their little world humming around them, she knew they'd found their forever. Clumsy, stubborn, and all theirs. Elena Brooks and Jamie Sullivan had come a long way from that chaotic night. Her drunk and sprawling across him waking up to an empty room and a moon pendant he couldn't let go of. Now their little house hummed with life, Luna's toys scattered across the floor, Jamie's half-burnt attempts at dinner lingering in the air, Elena's photos pinned up on every wall. It wasn't the ending she'd pictured when she'd stared at those two pink lines, terrified and alone. But sitting on that porch with him, her head on his chest, Luna asleep inside, it felt better than anything she could have dreamed up. She'd think about it sometimes, how a blurry mistake had turned into this, how Jamie, with his steady hands and fumbling heart, had chosen her and Luna, no questions asked. He wasn't perfect. God, the man could ruin a sandwich and call it cooking, but he was hers. And she was his, through the fights, the doubts, the storms that had tried to pull them apart. They'd built something real, not because it was easy, but because they'd both decided it was worth it. That night, as the stars blinked above them, Elena traced the pendant around her neck, the new one he'd given her, a promise he'd kept. "We're a mess, you know that," she said, half laughing. Jamie chuckled, his arm tightening around her. "Yeah, but we're a good mess. You, me, Luna, couldn't ask for more." She smiled, closing her eyes, feeling his heartbeat under her cheek. It was the same warmth she'd woken up to all those months ago. Only now, it was home, and as the quiet settled over them, she knew they'd keep choosing each other every clumsy, beautiful day ahead.